Our next speaker that I'd like to introduce is Dr. Satya Ramaswamy. Satya heads Mindtree's enterprise reimagination business, and he's been involved in a variety of digital technologies such as AI, Internet of Things, blockchain, big data, etc. He's an innovator with over 10 granted US patents, and before his role in Mindtree, he built up the digital business at TCS, in which it was involved in building a scaled-up global organization over a 7-year period. Satya is here to talk about his enthusiasm for the implementation of a lot of these digital technologies, and this will give us an opportunity for a conversation with both Satya and Lou after his presentation. Welcome, Satya.
No, it's when you, it's automatically connected. It's whatever you display here will show up.
No, but I think it's not going to the screen. Okay, here.
Yeah, because I've tried. Yeah, I've tried. Yeah, it's not a drag like to a screen type thing. It's
No. Just see if it is going to the screen. I don't think it's being sent to the screen. So,
okay.
yeah, move to the here.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Sorry, why don't you go ahead and talk in the meantime? Okay, here, somewhere here.
Of course, it works right.
No, I think this normally you here. How do you send to the screen?
Those settings.
AV service. Oh. Okay. What happened?
That's what I'm wondering. Why is it all of a sudden?
Does this guy know?
Projector. Why is it projector?
Should be
No,
display settings.
No, I think the projector is switched off accidentally. Hold on. Is this? Is it on?
It's that machine. Is it that projector?
Hold on. Can you just check if it is on?
Yeah.
It is on.
It's on. Okay. So we need to somehow think about.
Let's go to the settings and maybe the display settings.
Actually, what if we just do this? It's not making. It's not working. This is the kind of thing that we project. How do you Cortana
I gotta go to the settings.
project the second screen? Okay, here.
Duplicate.
Okay, that's what we needed.
What was it?
We had to project to the screen.
Okay.
Okay, we're in business.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Anand and the Douch Center for giving me this great opportunity to be here. It is indeed a pleasure to be in the company of fantastic Boilermakers. Such a pleasure to be here. And what I will do today is to talk through some of the examples of digital projects implementation in a variety of industries So I come from a company called Mindtree Limited, and we are a global technology services company. And we work across multiple industry verticals, banking, retail, and including manufacturing. So I'll talk about some of the experiences in the manufacturing industry, but also talk about some of the experiences in some related industries that might be applicable to manufacturing. So to give a,
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Mm-hmm.
So many of you might have seen this example of Google Assistant. And the voice that is coming from the right side is essentially AI, right? It is not a human person. But now the technology has evolved to the point where you can completely reimagine the whole customer service part of enterprises by using fully automated attending to calls and so on at a level of fidelity that is completely unimaginable just a few years ago. So likewise, there is another example I will show, which is, I'm sure this is a company where there are a lot of boiler makers there. This is SpaceX. And how they went and reimagined the whole launch business, right? By using Internet of Things and by using data from sensors and quick data processing and the corresponding actuation, SpaceX is able to reimagine their industry, right? Reduce launch cost by a factor of 10 to 100, and that completely disrupts the whole industry. So that is what we call as reimagination. And if you take a look at what are all the key digital technologies that have been having an impact on the industry and including in manufacturing, we can think of this as the digital 5 forces, right? So here, being in a management school, we all know about the industry 5 forces. And in digital, again, it is 5. And the first important one, the technology is the mobile technology. So mobile applications from the time that Steve Jobs launched the iPhone have come to the point where it is an indispensable part of our lives. So I started my career with a great company, Midwestern company called Motorola, way back in 1993. And the mobiles of today is very different from the mobile that was there in those old days. And mobile has been a very important factor, not only in the consumer space, but also within the enterprise. So mobile applications, a very important force in this digital 5 forces picture. And the second very important part is also what Lou talked about, the data processing. So again, the big data as a technology started evolving way back in 2005, but from 2008 onwards, for the last 10 years or so, we are seeing the application of big data, the processing of very large volume, variety, and velocity of data, and extracting intelligence, and potentially now with IoT, the actuation of sensors and so on using big data is the second big digital force. And clearly, we all have heard about cloud. So the ability to have practically unlimited computing power in the network and not having to worry about maintaining and scaling of those computing capability has been a very tremendous change in the way that technology has been evolving in the last few years. And again, it has been around from 2006, but I would say from the last 4 or 5 years, enterprises which are hesitant to adopt cloud are adopting in a big way for the very reasons they were avoiding it before. Long back in 2006, when you talk to an enterprise about cloud computing, they would say the security is a main concern. But today, enterprises are actually moving to the cloud because of the security that the cloud service providers are providing. So the cloud is a very important factor in the digital scenario. And then social media, the ability to process very large amounts of data from the social media, be it on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and other social media, has been a very important component in the digital scheme of things. And finally, the fifth important force, which has been really emerging in the last 2 or 3 years in a big way, has been AI, right? So AI has been there as a technology for the last 20, 30 years, but over the last 3 or 4 years, by the availability of very strong processing capability and the data that is available using big data systems has led to a complete revolution of the field of AI, and that is something that we saw in the Google Assistant demo a little while ago. So in addition to these digital 5 forces, we also have what we can call as composite forces. So the IoT is something that I would call it as a composite force because it actually combines more than one of these forces, and then it has a big impact on the enterprise. So taking one example of AI and see why AI can help enterprises reimagine their businesses. And again, it is just something that happened in the last 3 or 4 years, largely driven by the availability of phenomenal computing power in the form of GPUs and FPGAs or field programmable gate arrays, and driven by a company in the valley called NVIDIA, right? So the GPUs from NVIDIA completely revolutionized AI. And if you take an example, it is pretty stunning. If you take the voice transcription, that is, listening to a conversation or a speech and then converting into text, the accuracy that humans typically can come up with is at best about 95%, right? So there is an error rate of 5.1%. But now Google has systems that can have an error rate which is even less, right? About 4.9%. Way better, better than human beings. And then if you take image recognition, so this is a very, very important capability. And Steve talked about the vision analytics. A lot of it is driven by, again, deep learning and the GPUs. Again, the human capability is error rate in a specific competition called ImageNet. The error rate of human-driven image recognition is at about 5.1%. And but then there are specific neural networks that are available called ResNet, which can go to an error rate of just 2.25%, right? Again, better than human capability. And these are generic capabilities, but now let's see how it translates into something that is very domain intensive, right? So being a doctor, I think, is one of the highest domain intensive thing. You need to go a lot of training. And the specific case we'll talk about is that of a dermatologist looking at a picture of skin cancer, a melanoma, and the typical success rate of a dermatologist is about 86.6% in identifying a skin cancer accurately by looking at pictures. And at the same time, the convolutional neural networks today have been trained to recognize these cancers at an accuracy of about 95%. Right? So it is pretty significant and a very disruptive kind of capability that is being available there. And all of these digital 5 forces and the composite forces like IoT essentially enable an enterprise to go and fundamentally reimagine itself, meaning creating something that is fundamentally new in a variety of ways, at least in 6 possible dimensions to give a sustainable competitive advantage. And so the first one area that we have seen the impact in our engagements is in the business model. So clearly, changing a business model is extremely hard, as we know in the industry. But if you can change the business model in your industry, then you get a very sustainable competitive advantage over your peers, right? In a very disruptive way, and can grab a lot of market share. Many times also companies have been in a certain business model for a long time, and for them to change to a different business model by going to a different offering is also equally hard. But if you can do that, that is again creates tremendous new value. And obviously the second important aspect is fundamentally changing the products and services, right? So we'll see examples of that. How can we use these digital technologies to create entirely new products and services that never existed before? And many enterprises are in a need to do this because they're all hitting the barrier in terms of revenue growth. In slowing markets, they need to fundamentally create new products to get new revenue growth. And that is something that digital can help. And then customer segments. When I went to business school about 20 years ago, what I learned in terms of segmentation is very different from what it is practiced in the industry today. So the reason is about 20 years back, the kind of data tools that are available today using big data and the ability to track each individual as a specific segment of one was not available there. And the way we used to think about segmentation is very different. But then we also have this ideal, right? The ideal segmentation is if I can segment each person as an individual, right? And then be able to serve products and services and even get pricing that is very tailored to that particular individual. And that is now possible today, and that is a big disruption. And the sales channels, we will see a great example here of an iconic American company which went about changing their channel entirely by using this digital capability, and that is again a possibility. And then the business processes. So many of the business processes in the industry today and particularly in manufacturing or manual business processes, right? It is about people going and checking the status of machinery and then taking some actions and so on. A lot of it has evolved over tens and tens of years, but now with capabilities like vision, you can completely rewrite these business processes. And finally, the enterprise experience, how the stakeholders of the enterprise experience the enterprise itself, such as the customers, the experience of the customers, the experience of the employees, and the experience of the ecosystem and of the investors. All of this can be fundamentally be reimagined by using these digital capabilities. So these are at least the 6 different areas of an enterprise that can be reimagined by using digital technologies. And in order to accomplish this, one needs to have a very different set of skills than what was needed before. So one needs a strong domain capability, the ability to understand the specific domain really well, such as if it is manufacturing, you need to know manufacturing really well to do this. And then the technology, right? So clearly, any fundamental change or progress comes only with the technological change. And so these digital technologies give that ability. And then what we see in our engagements is that because we are looking at creating things that are fundamentally new, creativity is a very important capability that you need to have in the workforce. One of the deans of a very important engineering school in the US asked me, okay, what is the skill that you would like to see in our graduates that you would most value or cherish? And I said, it is really creativity, right? The rest of the things that can be taught or acquired, but the creativity is a very unique skill that is being of a lot of use in this digital reimagination kind of activities. And then finally, the context, the specific in the customer and the specific systems of the customer is also very important for doing some of these kind of engagements. And the good thing is that digital reimagination with the capability of this digital creates fundamentally new value that was not there before. So if you take the business model reimagination and the business and the products and service reimagination, most of it is by doing what I call as data transparency, right? So the data is already there. So like Lou was saying, the data is already there, but if you can take it and make use of it, you are creating fundamentally new value that is not there. And typically it happens in the case of business model reimagination and product and service reimagination. So that we can call as data equity. And then if you take customer segment reimagination and the channel reimagination, it creates again new value, which is essentially the brand equity of the company. And then finally the business processes and then the enterprise experience essentially is about leveraging the capability of people in a better way, and it creates new value for the company we call as people equity, right? So bottom line, companies that have leveraged digital in a big way have created fundamentally new value to their enterprises that was not there before, and largely because of these 3 types. Now let us look at one company that we all know, and I don't know how many of you might have seen the Amazon Go store in Seattle. I was there a few weeks ago, and it is pretty amazing experience how they have transformed or reimagined the entire retail experience by using nothing more than video cameras, right, primarily. And the narrative is really nice, I thought, because they tell exactly how they view the new capabilities of AI, computer vision, and machine learning into the fabric, the very fabric of the retail store to give a completely reimagined kind of capability. And that is what Amazon has done with Amazon Go is something that any manufacturing enterprise can do as well. So this is a great example.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go.
It is really very impressive, right? So what they have is just cameras on the ceiling of the store. There are a lot of cameras, many cameras. And then you just go and scan your barcode, QR code that comes into your mobile when you're entering the store. At that moment, they're capturing your face. They take the headshot from the top. And from then on, they're simply tracking you in the store. If you're extending your arm to grab a product, they know exactly what you're picking up. And if they know that you're putting back into your basket, for example. Just by using all that, they know exactly what products you have taken, and then they are able to charge you when you walk out of the store as well. And so now we'll see a little bit more examples in the manufacturing industry as well. So the first example we'll talk about is an American engine manufacturer. So they create these big diesel engines that go onto these big rig trucks. And many times you would have seen that these trucks are broken down in the highway, inconveniencing the shipper, the person expecting to receive the product, and so on. So what they did was to embed sensors onto the engine. And clearly, I heard yesterday that the sensors are already there. So it's about taking the data through telematics and then processing it in near real time, and then being able to give an indication to the truck operator even 6 to 7 hours ahead of time that the engine is going to break down, right? And in addition to that, they can also send a link to the driver with the Google Maps link of the service station that is nearby, where they can actually go and fix the problem. So what it helped this company is to create an ability to have a fundamentally new service that they never had before, all using the data that is already there, right? So they just created the ability to process it in near real time, and then being able to create an entirely new service that created incremental revenue. The next example is that of a oil and gas engineering leader. They are in the business of engineering, procurement, installation, and construction. So they make these big oil rigs on shore, and then they ship it to the oil well, and then bolt it there. And what they never had was the ability to service these platforms, right? So that was done by people with crews. They just go out on these helicopters and fix these problems, which is a very risky operation and therefore very costly. So now what they are doing is to create a digital twin of the operational platform called the operational twin, and having real-time information about the entire status of this platform. Right? So what this gives them is the ability to enter into the new business, right? The maintenance business, without actually having people. So which is the big advantage in which they go and disrupt this entire business. Again, a new source of revenue, and also gives them the ability to win some of their traditional competitions in terms of bids more effectively. And this is, again, showing the power of vision. So this is a Middle Eastern shipping company, and they have the problem of people walking into work without protective equipment. And I'm sure this problem is there in many of the manufacturing companies. People walk in without protecting equipment, they get into accidents, and then you have to shut down the plant. And as we all know, the unplanned shutdowns are a big productivity killer. So what this company is now doing is to use vision technologies to have videos from the cameras that are already there, so no new equipment need to be installed. That is the beauty of it. And then be able to detect workers walking in without protective equipment, and then immediately take corrective actions, right? So let me show a small video of how this is done. So essentially, by using vision technologies, you can do instead of having people going around and checking for protective equipment and so on. And then this is the global printer manufacturer I referred to before. So typically, we know that the printers run out of ink, right? And it's a very inconvenient thing. And likewise, the printer manufacturer doesn't have idea of the amount of inventory they need to keep or production schedules they need to keep. So all they did was to instrument these printers so that they can generate the printer ink information, and then they send it to the central big data system. And using that, now they have a very accurate idea of the inventory and stock that is needed to be kept in various parts of the globe. And very importantly, they created an entirely new service, right, where the customer signs up with the company called Instant Ink, and they directly ship the product to the customer even before the ink runs out. So they don't have to run to the store to create to buy the ink. It's essentially created a fundamentally new channel, which also puts them closer to the consumer. And the next example here is again using vision. So this is an example of an Australian retailer who has this problem of internal theft. And again, that is a challenge that is there in many manufacturing companies of products disappearing. primarily not by external people, but internal workers essentially taking these products. So it was a very intractable problem. They need to have people coming and monitoring this. But now with the convolutional neural network, they are able to detect thefts very accurately and then be able to handle that, right? Which is a pretty amazing capability. And this is an example of an European manufacturer who again had unplanned downtime of their conveyor belts because his motors keep wearing out. And all they did was to implement sensors in these motors, and with the ability to proactively predict failures ahead of time. And clearly, unplanned downtime leads to having excess inventory to handle for downed plant and so on. But now, with the ability of predictive maintenance, they are able to have the plant up and running and be able to undertake maintenance at the most appropriate time possible. And the last example is that of a global car original equipment manufacturer. And one key theme of this conference also is personalization. So typically when we go into a car, even in the most advanced cars like a Tesla, for example, you need to essentially choose who you are, right? You just open the menu and say, I am this person, and then the entire seat and everything gets personalized according to you. And then there are a lot of safety issues, right? So people, sometimes drowsy, they don't know, they're not watching the road and so on. And what this OEM is doing is with an inward-facing camera in the cabin, they can detect exactly what the driver is doing. And obviously, with person detection, I can exactly tell who you are. You don't need to tell me that I am this and this person, but the moment it sees from the camera that you are entering the car, it can personalize the whole experience according to what you want, right? On top of it, it has all the safety features, so it can actually go and take care of the safety, and we will show a small video that demonstrates this capability. So this is almost like having mom or dad, watching the way you're driving all the time. Okay, so with that scary thought, again, thank you very much, Anant, Professor Anant, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.